ahead of a 2-week Senate recess? Probably nothing. Or will Democrats try to go it alone? Let's turn to someone who knows the state of play. The chair of the Senate Rules Committee, key Democrat Senator Amy Klobuchar, Minnesota. Good to see you.
Thanks, Chris. It's just great to be on. I remember being on your show on infrastructure early on when I put my plan out in the presidential campaign, and here we are again. I think it is really, really important to move on infrastructure. I'm glad that the bipartisan group have been working together and working with the White House. And at the same time, remember, there's a second effort going on, and that is about human infrastructure and things like child care and making sure there's adequate funding for housing. And my view of this is you can do both things at once, but we need some general agreement on both things to move forward because they're equally important. And I'm glad that they're making progress.
So let's simplify this for the likes of me. So there are two paths here. The Democrats, especially the left wing of the party, wanted it all in one. Is it your understanding that the deal that we're hearing from Manchin and Romney are really just on one aspect of this, not the child care and the other things?
Okay, Chris, I know it doesn't make for good TV, but there's three paths. There's all-in-one, yes. There's just doing the infrastructure that they're talking about. But there is a third path. And the third path is allowing this bipartisan effort to go forward and at the same time having a general agreement on a second package that would use reconciliation. And that way we could make sure that we are focused on things like broadband. And I lead that bill. I'm so glad they put significant funding in for broadband so we can have access regardless of your zip code in this country, but also we have a second track going on through reconciliation. To me, that is the third path that makes the most sense.
So your understanding is that what Romney and Manchin, the bipartisan one, is really just, let's call it traditional roads and bridges. The Wi-Fi and infrastructure that I agree with you, by the way, is every bit as important as infrastructure.
No, the Wi-Fi is in their package.
So Wi-Fi is in the package they're talking about. Okay.
And things like ports and waterways.
Right.
It's more traditional infrastructure, including broadband. But there are other things this nation needs right now. Anyone that had trouble getting childcare during the pandemic knows exactly what I'm talking about.
But that is not subject to this deal, and you say it may be a path of reconciliation. But do you have any reason to believe that the conservative Democrats, let's call it Manchin et al., maybe Sinema, maybe Tester, maybe one more, is there any agreement that they would do reconciliation on that second bill?
I think they will, and that's what we need to negotiate. They've done this once before, and they are open to this, and I think we need to go hand in hand here, maybe not dot every I and cross every T, but have some general agreement on the funding, and I think we can do that at the same time.
Okay, we'll see on that. This is some good sign of progress. We'll see if it gets nailed down. We'll see the pushback from your brothers and sisters on the far left flank, especially in the House, about this. Now, let me ask you quickly about the video we had at the top.
Yes.
What do your brothers and sisters on the right side of the aisle tell you in private? Don't give their names, obviously, but how do they justify being quiet or selling the tripe that this is just tourists taking a tour and this is not so bad and it's being overhyped? How do they justify it in private?
Well, first of all, in private, they say things that are very similar to what they said that night, that this was an invasion of the Capitol, an attack, an insurrection. And what bothers me is the necessary things we have to do right now. Not all of them are happening. We should have an independent 9/11 style commission. And I'm glad we did our report that was focused on changes we need to see to the leadership of the police, to the line officers, get the respect they deserve if we ever would have anything like this happen again, and so we make improvements. Secondly, we should be supporting the efforts of the Justice Department. We should be doing extensive work on the rise of white supremacism, and that could be, of course, part of this 9/11 style commission on what happened on January 6th. All of that should be happening. And it was Ron Johnson in my committee hearing that literally said, that I was chairing at that moment, that literally said, diminished this and said they were just out for fun and, going down, quoting someone saying this, where he clearly was sending the message that he didn't take this seriously. Anyone that was here, my staff that was in a closet in the Capitol with a fork in their hand, as they heard the insurrectionists going through the door only yards away from them. The police officers, many of whom you have interviewed, Chris, including the officer that was called the N-word multiple times and turned at the end to another officer and said, "Is this America?" Ask them what really happened. They'll tell you what happened. This was an all-out attack, and I'm glad the Justice Department is strongly pursuing these charges, and I know there's more to come.
One other thing, how do you get a deal on infrastructure, but you can't get the same hearts and minds to get a deal on protecting voting rights in this country?
Okay, that's the third one, and that is when you look at our democracy, as I said at the inauguration, it is the moment where we basically brushed ourselves off, stood up, and moved forward. Well, part of that moving forward is passing the torch on to understand that this is also about our elections and our democracy. 22 laws have now been passed in states across the country limiting the right to vote since the last election, with more to come. The governor of Texas just calling in for a special session to once again force those legislators to try to do something which is inconceivable to me, to making it harder to do early voting and hurt people who have disabilities from voting. That's what's happening now. And that is why when they blocked us from voting on that package, I thought it was one of the saddest moments for our democracy. They literally wouldn't even let us debate it for a week or 3 days or even a day. They stopped the debate. But for your viewers out there that care about democracy, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, I can tell you we're not giving up. I'm taking the Rules Committee. We're going to have a field hearing in Georgia, because maybe if we get out of this place and people start listening to people who stand in line for 10 hours and then aren't allowed to be given water and food by volunteers, maybe that's going to change some hearts and minds. At the same time, we've got to work on changing the filibuster. I would abolish it. I have come to that decision after seeing all of the gridlock and all of the inability to move on the important issues of our time, like immigration reform and climate change. And we are just not giving up. And that's why that's the most important thing for people to know. No one should give up on our democracy.
Thank you very much, Senator Amy Klobuchar. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, more breaking news. One of the world's biggest pop stars